Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NICHOLASMCGIRR.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of Stories in the Cemetery. This is Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife, your host. And let me start, I guess, with an apology. It's been well over a month since I've had an episode out, and there's a reason for that. I wanted to share with all of you that Stories in the Cemetery is now going on tour. So what does that mean exactly? I've been invited by Cavalier Tours of downtown Charleston, South Carolina, to host a ghost hunting / haunted tour of downtown Charleston. And of course, with October coming up, this is a pretty big month, and they were looking for somebody to host their haunted tours. And with some of the things that I've done here for you guys on Stories in a Cemetery, they wanted to use the same branding and, of course, use my logos and things like that, which is super awesome. I'm so excited. But at the same token, this is one of those, there'll be more, I guess, cases for you guys. So this one is the start of that. This episode today is about Philadelphia Alley, and that will actually be one of the features on the tours that I'll be giving through downtown Charleston. So if you are ever in the area and you are looking for a haunted tour to go on that's a little bit more interactive, check out Stories in a Cemetery in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. I would love to meet you and give you a tour of the downtown area. What's also cool about this, guys, is I'm going to be using the equipment that I talked about on previous episodes, and I've added a few more pieces using, grid lights and all kinds of other things, where I'm going to hand those tools and pieces of equipment to you, the tourists coming through downtown Charleston. So it'll be interactive, and it'll be a ghost hunt for sure. So planning on 5 locations for my first tour, which is actually tonight, and I'm recording this on September 28th. It's kind of a test run for some friends and family here in town, and hopefully they're going to give me some great feedback, and I'll be able to improve the tours as they move along. So guys, I'm so excited about this. Stories in a Cemetery and the brand of Stories in a Cemetery is going to be spreading and growing. So needless to say that I will be doing this pretty much full time. So working on more episodes for you, the listeners out there in the podcast world, as well as giving the tours throughout the week and, of course, heavier weekends. So again, guys, I wanted to give you that news, and I've been working pretty diligently on getting this tour ready and making sure I have enough locations and all the right research. And you guys know what I do. I'm a writer. It's what I do. So let's get into the episode today. It's Philadelphia Alley, and one of those things where I've heard of it, but I hadn't really heard a whole lot about it. So I wanted to make sure that I had everything correct. And I spent a lot of time down there, and you guys know I don't do like nighttime type initial investigations. So this was during the daytime. But let's get into the history first. The history of Philadelphia Alley, it was actually named a few different things, and it's also known as Dueler's Alley and Cow Alley. Cow Alley, as in, moo cows. It actually held a lot of livestock, a couple hundred years ago. So it was called Cow Alley originally at one point. And then it was known as the Dueler's Alley. So Dueler's Alley is because there were duels in this alley, and this is where they were set up, is right here in downtown Charleston. It's now known as Philadelphia Alley, and that's due to the relief that the city of Philadelphia gave to Charleston in one of the fires, which was in 1810. But we're going to talk about Dueler's Alley more so than anything else. Obviously, there's a haunted story here, which is always the reason behind my investigations. So, couple cool things about the alley while I was down there investigating. There's like some attributes here that I wanted to look into that I had also heard about, but wanted to kind of look further into. First off, if you look down at the bricks that make the alley, I checked the walls too, but it was mainly in the groundwork bricks that are on the ground. You'll notice some fingerprints and handprints right there in the bricks, and this is part of the history of this alley, which is these bricks like this that I'm going to explain to you are all over Charleston, but just brought a little bit more life, a little bit more history to the alley when I was investigating it. But there are handprints and fingerprints in there of the children that actually made the bricks. So these were slave children that made these bricks, and usually those prints are from the child that had to turn the bricks while they were hardening. So very interesting story there behind the bricks that are laid on the ground. And there's some pictures, of course, on the website blog. You can find that at nicholasmcgirr.com. And I only took a couple, but I'm going to feature these, of course, on the tours. That way we can actually, put the EMF detector near them, and, maybe use the grid light pen that I picked up to maybe see if we can capture something with that. The other really cool attribute to this, and like I said, this was Dueler's Alley, and basically, in a nutshell, there are obviously several graveyards all over downtown Charleston. But the cool thing about Dueler's Alley is there's an entryway to St. Philip's Church graveyard. And the reason for that, it was so that they could take the losing party of the duel straight to his grave. Now, there's no waiting for an ambulance or coroner or anything like that to come by and, pronounce this person dead. You're shot, you're dead, your friends take you to your grave. And there was an entryway straight into the graveyard, which I found was a very interesting fact about this particular alley. Now, the alley is gorgeous. It had some back doors to some of the local businesses down there, and it is filled with greens and flowers, and it's decorative. And it's a well-known alley in downtown Charleston, and just these two attributes of the bricks and the entryway to the gravesite, the graveyard, was super interesting to me. Of course, you could check out those pictures on the website. But let's stop right here for just a minute and give some time to our sponsor. And we're back. So thanks, guys, for allowing me to put sponsors inside of my podcast. I appreciate you listening. And, of course, share. And check out those sponsors that I'll have in the future. So let's get back to Philadelphia Alley. This was super fun to do. So, of course, being called, I'm going to stop calling it Philadelphia Alley. I'm going to start calling it Dueler's Alley just because of the nature of this haunting. The haunting is allegedly from what is known as the Whistler. So, of course, very cheesy name. But this Whistler character, his name was Dr. Joseph Brown Ladd. And, of course, you can hear this story from any local Charlestonian that gives tours or knows the history down here. But while I was down there, there's alleged, what's the word I'm looking for? Audibles. There's alleged audibles of hearing the doctor whistling because he was a known whistler, and obviously a gunshot. So while I was down there, I did hear some whistling. I took it as being some birds, so that was kind of debunked right off the top. It was very early morning when I was down there. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a whole lot of foot traffic. A lot of locals down there use the alley to just kind of cut through some of the side streets to get to their jobs. They take a break back there. It's very peaceful. But again, it was early morning. I want to say it was between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, maybe between 9 and 10. Don't exactly recall. But there was some whistling. But again, could have been some birds. There was a lot of birds nearby. I did not take it as the doctor coming through, that clearly. So hopefully, with the tours coming up, I'll be able to catch some of those things on my voice recorder. So, but the story goes that the doctor was in town, living in Charleston, because he was trying to prove that he could provide for the woman that he was courting in his hometown in Rhode Island. So the townsfolk in Rhode Island were basically accusing Dr. Ladd of just wanting, this woman's money that she inherited from her family. Her parents had passed away. They left her with a large sum of money, and the claim was that the doctor was just after the money. Not so. So to prove that, he continued his doctor practice, and he moved down here to Charleston. So he became friends with a Ralph Isaacs, and this is brought up because this is obviously part of the duel story. But Ralph Isaacs, once Dr. Ladd, arrived in Charleston, he was, kind of directed, by some of the locals to go check out, a local pub, local bar, and some con men were trying to get the best of Dr. Ladd, and Mr. Isaacs stepped in and kind of saved him from that and possibly, getting killed. So their friendship actually grew, from there. And then Dr. Ladd was becoming very popular around town. He was known for, being a whistler. He was known as being a very jovial person. And of course, being a doctor, he had a lot of high society friends here in Charleston. So, moving on, Isaacs wasn't exactly happy about, his rise, Dr. Ladd's rise in popularity. So he decided that they were going to just kind of go their separate ways, and Dr. Ladd didn't want that. Ralph Isaacs was a true friend, and he didn't want to break off the friendship just yet. So one night they were actually at a Shakespearean play in downtown Charleston. Of course, different seating based on their societal differences. But they began to kind of discuss the play afterwards on their way home. And they had an argument about one of the actresses, and then soon it turned into an argument about Dr. Ladd's love back home in Rhode Island, and it just became a feud between the two of them. They definitely went their separate ways after that, where Isaacs even made a couple of remarks in a local paper about Dr. Ladd, and eventually it turned into, we're going to duel this out. We're going to actually go to Dueler's Alley, and we're going to settle our differences. And Dr. Ladd didn't want to do that. So his intention was that when he was to turn and take his shot at Ralph Isaacs, he was going to intentionally shoot to the side of him so he didn't hurt his friend or kill his friend. And Ralph Isaacs had a different story. He wanted to take out Dr. Ladd. So when they took their shots, obviously Dr. Ladd's shot went off to the side, probably hitting a brick or something along the side of the wall. That's actually something I could probably look for. Go look for, maybe a gunshot inside one of the bricks if it hasn't been repaired. But anyway, Ralph Isaacs' shot actually made a direct hit into Dr. Ladd. He didn't die right away, so he wasn't taken through the entryway that I talked about earlier. So he was aided by his friends back home, where I went to go visit this house, and it was about 0.5 miles away from Philadelphia Alley, and it was at 59 Church Street, which is, like I said, it's about half a mile. So he's got his friends aiding him, and they're helping him get home. There's no research that really says what happened to Ralph Isaacs afterwards, but looks like when Dr. Ladd went home, he was, got to the second floor, and that's where he spent his last 10 days suffering from the gunshot wound, and then he eventually died in that home. So I did pull out some of the equipment. It wasn't early morning, so I didn't have everything out as far as, my, ghost hunting equipment and things like that. But I did have the EMF detector running the whole time. So while I was in the alley, and I was in there for about an hour or so, just looking for things, checking out the bricks, those kind of, seeing what the EMF was going to do around certain things. It did spike when I was standing in the dead center of the alley. So, between latitude and longitude, I was dead center. And it only spiked for about a minute or so, and then it went, right back down to green again. And then I happened to notice when I was traveling back and forth, keep in mind this alley is only a block long. So I kind of explored it 4 or 5 times going back and forth. It spiked again in that same area, and I did kind of stop. Nothing was in arm's reach. And this EMF detector is pretty sensitive. It's like something has to be right on top of it in order for it to even get out of the green or away from the dead zone, so to speak. So something was definitely coming through there. And again, it only lasted for about a minute. And then I really didn't have any other spikes. I even put the EMF detector near the bricks that are pictured on the website. I didn't get any kind of readings there. But what I did find was when I reached 59 Church Street, because I did want to see this house, I did want to get a good picture for the site, near the address, like I put the EMF detector right on the 59, and I got a spike there. But of course, it's a house. I don't know what kind of electrical lines or anything like that is behind it, but it didn't come back. So I had one big spike all the way to red, and then it just went right back down to green. And I stayed around the house for about 10-15 minutes or so, just kind of checking things out. There's a sign on the front of the house. I wanted to make sure I had a good picture of that. And then I tested the 59 again with the EMF detector, and I didn't get anything. So I don't know if it was just kind of a sign, a warning, or somebody just saying hello. But apparently this house at 59 Church Street has quite a bit going on with it. The sign outside, which was posted by the Preservation Society of Charleston, actually reads Thomas Rose's house, built in 1735. So I'm going to go ahead and read this just to show you how much history is here, because I'm sure I'm going to be drawn back to this house at some point in time from one of these other investigations that I may have to dive into, especially for these tours coming up. So it reads, in 1680, town lot number 61 was granted by the Lord's proprietor to Elizabeth Willis, and in 1701 was deeded to William Elliot and later to his son Thomas Elliot. This notable early Georgian house replaced a smaller house on the premises and was built by Thomas Rose soon after his marriage in 1733 to Beulah Elliot, daughter of Thomas Elliot. In 1786, Dr. Joseph Ladd Brown was carried to his room in this house after being mortally wounded in a duel. It is alleged that his ghost still inhabits this house. So, have I been through the house? I have not been through the house. I would love to take a tour, and of course, bring the equipment to see what else I can find. If I, team up with a psychic for these tours, which I very well may. Me and the owner of Cavalier Tours have already discussed this, about teaming up with a psychic to bring along with the tours, but I'd like to have some more evidence and stories to tell while I'm actually on the tours. So if you want to help out with this investigation or hear more of it or help investigate it, of course, check out Stories in a Cemetery tours whenever you're in the Charleston area, and I will be glad to show you around town and tell you this story along with others while you are investigating for yourself what actually happened here in downtown Charleston. So guys, that's the story for today. Really appreciate you guys hanging in there, and for those of you listening or first-time listeners, welcome to Stories in the Cemetery. You can always find Stories in the Cemetery on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Nick McGurr Books. And of course, at charlestoncavaliertours.com, you can find more information about the Stories in the Cemetery tours and the dates and times, and that way you can pick up your tickets there. You can actually check out the blog posts and the pictures from this story on nicholasmcgirr.com. That's NICHOLASMCGIRR.com. And of course, if you go underneath the blog for Stories in a Cemetery, Philadelphia Alley will be the title there. And of course, if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, we would love for you to like and review the podcast. It only helps me get more listens. And then, of course, with me going full-time of writing more books, investigating more locations, and doing ghost tours, I could always use your help on Patreon. So for just $1 a month, you can help keep this podcast going, and that way it helps me to investigate more places, update equipment, those kind of things. So if you'd like to help out with that, you can go to patreon.com/Nicholas McGurr. So guys, that's been this week's Story in a Cemetery. I'm hoping to meet you guys very soon by you guys coming out to the tours and checking this out. But of course, the best thing you can do for me is to share this episode, get it out there, share it with your friends, share it with your Facebook groups, and that way we can get the word out about these tours, and I can continue investigating and doing what I do best, which is tell stories. Until next time, guys, I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgirr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.